what my art personally means to me is much more of a cathartic expression of current emotions, and then they tend to translate themselves onto a canvas in a form of therapy. A lot of them can be color relations, red for love or anger, green, if you've ever read The Great Gatsby, for jealousy, blue, calm, cooling colors, anywhere from yellow to orange to represent sunlight, and I take into consideration how vital that is to our personal happiness. And then from there comes theory, and that is what I learned while attending mass art in terms of balancing out a relationship of 70% cool to 30% warm, as well as having, if constructing a landscape, not having it put as a focal point dead center of the painting, and taking into account spatial relationships and to what can make the painting as interesting as possible in terms of composition, color relationships, and then hopefully and most importantly my personal input and my emotions behind it in its entirety. So between the ages of 17 and 19, I was fortunate enough to travel a lot with bands. I got to see pretty much the entire US, Canada, East Coast to West Coast, and during that time I started drawing a lot. My bandmates, bands that I was tour managing, etc., started telling me that I should go down the path of being a tattoo artist. So that was something that I started taking into consideration, talking to my personal tattoo artist about, etc. And when I came home and music was all said and done for me, I needed a path. And being a rebellious teen from the transitional period of 19 to 20, 21, I was constantly going back and forth living with friends or my mom's house if I was lucky enough, my father's house if he was gone on business trips and I could sneak in through a window, but essentially had no stability. And I got offered a hand by my father, a proposition where if I went back to school, then I could live with him and have some form of a steady home life, which obviously is beneficial to having a more positive life in general, less chaotic. And then school came into the picture and gave me some structure, and it was definitely a relief attending community college, as when I was 18 I went to a state school. I went for public relations, just at the urging of my parents in terms of what and where my talent lies, public speaking, sales, etc. But in my heart I knew it was wrong. So at the end of my first year I dropped out. Spent a little bit of time soul searching. That's when bands came into play. And then upon entering community college, when I was able to live with my father, during my second semester, I chose to take basic drawing as an elective. And when I took that class, my professor, who has still been incredibly influential on me, I still speak with her. We keep in touch every few months, but she was the first person to essentially tell me that I was ever good at anything, and that's when it came to drawing. And that was just starting off with still lifes and then going into mixed media, and then I continued taking classes with her for lithography, etching, intaglio, etc. And all of that support started to essentially resonate with the rest of the art faculty, and everyone kind of scooped me up and helped me get into a very reputable art school, being Mass Art, where my education continued. And I felt it to be so important not only to not stop pursuing my passions, but as well as not letting those down who supported me. So I, upon graduating and while attending school, pushed myself as hard as possible and continue to do so in order to be as successful as possible as a fine artist, which is very difficult to do in this day and age. I think it always has been, but you're waiting for your, hopefully a little bit longer than 15 minutes of fame, if you will, but that one chance just to be given a shot at a significant amount of recognition amongst New York City galleries or Boston South End galleries. Inspiration comes from a variety of artists. In terms of illustrators, we have Ralph Steadman. His work with watercolor is amazing to me, and then using a pen to go ahead and essentially allow the paint, being watercolor, to do its job as a free-flowing medium, and then control it after it dries by giving it these borders with pen and ink. And I try to implement that into my painting. We have Gerhard Richter, who is just this phenomenal painter of the abstract movement and still one of the most successful living painters of our time. And his paintings involve him using a significant amount of paint and a squeegee that he makes himself in order to push the paint and mold it, etc. He even did a series of realistic portraits that he then pulled the squeegee over in order to distort. And his notion of color theory, balancing, and then tool making comes into consideration. So I started making my own tools, and rather than basing everything off of his work, I took the notion of a squeegee and started cutting my own shapes into it. Once I would put a layer of paint down, I would be able to use the squeegee to remove paint and expose the layer underneath, while simultaneously taking that remaining paint and putting it onto a different canvas. From there comes the notion, in very simple terms, of addressing string theory, which goes back into what my paintings are about. But it's all the possibilities of what a painting could be and having the layers established over them. Albrecht Olmheim, and he has this series that was just up in the Met or Guggenheim, where he just absolutely destroys his paintings. Just absolute chaos on canvas, and dismantling, disheveling, destroying his paint by intentionally burning it, tearing the canvas, pulling the paint away. If you put a layer of paint on that's too thick over a layer of paint that's too thin, you would be able, if it's a polymer-based and acrylic-based paint, to essentially rip it off the canvas and leave it hanging as if it was a jagged edge, exposing another layer underneath, which goes back to another interesting thing that I like to culminate in my paintings. So ultimately, I guess, in terms of my work, and it's not I guess, it's a statement, I like to take what my idols do, incorporate them all into a single painting, and then add my own personal creativity, self-expression, what I grew up with onto those, and turn it into a contemporary piece.